Ever feel like you're trying to follow one of those old maps? You're the ones I mean? Like the kind that tells you to turn left at the big oak tree.
Yeah.
Not exactly GPS age,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it? That's kind of what it feels like sometimes trying to figure out how to follow Christ's teachings, right?
It can.
But maybe we can find some modern-day landmarks, so to speak.
Okay.
We're diving into this address by President Dallin H. Oaks.
Okay.
He's a respected religious leader, and his words might just give us the directions we need.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right, so he starts right out with the Great Commandment.
Yeah, God love your neighbor.
Exactly. It's interesting how he presents that as the foundation for everything else.
It's like the North Star, isn't it?
It is. It's like our moral compass always pointing us in the right direction.
I like that. Yeah.
And I love the image he uses to explain it. The kite and the string.
Oh, yeah.
It makes those commandments feel less like a rule book and more like, I don't know, guidelines for an amazing flight.
It's a much better visual than a list of rules, right?
Yeah. Right. It's not about restricting the kite at all. It's about helping it soar even higher.
Exactly. And that string, those core principles, they become even more crucial when the winds of life start throwing challenges our way.
Oh, for sure.
Think about it. Tough choices, conflicts with loved ones, even just the daily grind. Keeping those principles in mind can help us navigate all of them.
It's like a lifeline.
It really is, helping us weather those storms.
So it's not just about believing in these principles. It's about living them.
100%.
He calls it the doctrine of Christ, and it seems to be all about putting faith into action.
Right. He talks about faith, repentance, baptism, the Holy Ghost, endurance, and becoming like a child.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It's about actively living these principles, letting them guide our choices and interactions every single day.
So less about checking boxes and more about letting those teachings really sink in and change us from the inside out.
Exactly. It's about transformation, not just information.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the idea of it all and forget to apply it in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. He gives a really interesting perspective on that, actually. He talks about the difference between permanent and temporary commandments.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, he uses the example of early church members being asked to move from New York to Ohio to Missouri, then Illinois, and finally to the West.
Wow, that's a lot of moving.
It was. And those were crucial instructions for them at that specific time.
Right, but not meant to be followed forever.
Exactly. Those were temporary commandments.
So how does that relate to us today?
Ah,
I mean, we're not being asked to pack up and move across the country.
maybe not. But it highlights that while some principles are timeless and unchanging, like those in the doctrine of Christ,
Okay.
others might need to be adapted to our specific circumstances.
So it's about figuring out what's non-negotiable in our lives. What are those core values that guide our decisions no matter what?
Exactly.
Mm.
And then figuring out how to apply them in a way that makes sense for the situation we're in.
So discerning the difference between the principle and the application.
Yes.
I like that. Now, shifting gears a bit, he then talks about something that feels really relevant today,
What's that?
contention.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
He seems to suggest it's become a major obstacle to following Christ's teachings.
He's not wrong. It seems like everywhere you turn these days, there's conflict and division.
And what's fascinating is how he emphasizes that Christ actually addressed this issue right after his resurrection.
Really, to the Nephites, right?
Yes. If there was ever a time to prioritize peace.
Right after coming back from the dead seems like a good time to talk about it.
Exactly. So what did he say about contention that was so important?
Well, he points out how Christ directly says that contention doesn't come from him. It comes from a source that thrives on division and discord.
We're being called to choose a different path, one of peace and understanding.
It's not always easy, though, is it?
Not at all. He even goes on to say we should love our enemies, which, let's be honest, is much easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. It's a difficult concept and I think often misunderstood.
How so?
People think it means you have to condone bad behavior or allow yourself to be mistreated, but that's not what it's about at all.
So what does it really mean then?
It's about choosing compassion over condemnation, trying to understand rather than judge.
That makes a lot more sense. Have you ever been in a situation where responding with love, even when it was incredibly hard, actually made a difference?
I think we all have those moments where we have to dig deep to find that empathy, especially when we're faced with anger or hurt.
It's not easy.
It's not.
Yeah.
But the takeaway here is that both contention and peacemaking are ultimately choices that we make in every interaction.
Every single time. We can choose contention or we can choose reconciliation.
And that choice, that commitment to being a peacemaker, is what sets followers of Christ apart.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Embodying those teachings, not just talking about them.
Which makes me wonder, how do we know if we're really letting those teachings sink in? How can we be sure we're not just paying lip service to these ideas?
He actually addresses that head on. He quotes a thought-provoking question from President Nelson. Are we willing to let God prevail in our lives? To let his words, commandments, and covenants influence what we do each day?
Wow, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you examine your priorities. Are those teachings just a Sunday ritual, or are they woven into the fabric of our daily lives?
It's about aligning our actions with our beliefs, making our faith more than just words.
Precisely. And ultimately, President Oaks leaves us with this beautiful vision of what it means to truly follow Christ's example.
What's that? What does he say?
He says that just as Christ chose to forego contention, so should we.
Okay.
He calls us to adopt the language and methods of peacemakers in every aspect of our lives, our public actions, our personal relationships, everything.
So it's not that we can't have strong opinions or advocate for what we believe in, it's how we go about it. Are we approaching those conversations with respect and a genuine desire to understand, even when we disagree?
You got it. It's about valuing understanding over being right, choosing compassion over judgment.
It's challenging, but it sounds incredibly rewarding.
It is.
I love how he connects all of this back to the idea of becoming holier. It's not about checking off a to-do list. It's about an internal transformation.
Yes. Letting those teachings permeate every part of our lives, shaping how we interact with the world around us.
Striving to be a little more like Christ each day, even in small ways.
That's beautifully said.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. From the importance of the Great Commandment to the challenges of peacemaking in a world that often feels anything but peaceful. It's a lot to process.
It is. But I have a feeling these are the kinds of ideas that stay with you. They offer a roadmap for navigating life with more grace, more love, and more understanding.
It makes you wonder, how do we take these lofty ideals and put them into practice? Especially when faced with the everyday realities of our lives.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that old saying, right? Between said and done, there's a whole world of undone.
So true. Knowing what to do and actually doing it, two very different things.
Right. So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, thankfully, President Oaks gives us a starting point.
Okay, I like starting points.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
He ends with a question.
Oh.
He asks, what small step can you take today to be a bit more like Christ in your interactions with others?
Huh. I like that. Bring you down to a single day, a single action.
It's not about some grand gesture, right? It's about those everyday moments where we have the choice to react differently.
Yeah, to choose a different path.
Exactly. Maybe it's choosing kindness when someone's being snarky, or really trying to understand their perspective instead of just, jumping in to defend your own.
I'll do that. I'm totally guilty of that.
We all are. It's human nature. But even just really listening to someone when they need it, without interrupting or planning your response in your head.
It's about being present, isn't it?
Exactly. Being present and being aware of the impact even small actions can have.
Because those small things, they do matter.
They really do. They ripple outward more than we realize.
It's like that saying, people might not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
So true. And President Oaks actually quotes another religious leader, President Nelson, who talks about this.
What does he say?
He says one of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Christ is by how compassionately they treat others.
Interesting. So their compassion becomes like a litmus test.
In a way, it reveals the depth of their discipleship. Are they just talking the talk, or are they walking the walk?
Because if we're leaving people feeling hurt or diminished, that says something too, doesn't it?
It speaks volumes. And President Nelson goes on to say that true disciples of Christ are peacemakers. It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about actively trying to create an atmosphere of peace.
So it's a conscious choice we make, like you were saying earlier.
Every single time, contention or reconciliation, it's our choice.
And that choice, that commitment to being a peacemaker, that's what sets us apart.
It's about embodying those teachings, not just talking about them, living them out in our lives.
But how do we know if we're really doing that? If those teachings are really sinking in and changing how we live?
That's the question, isn't it?
Because it's easy to go through the motions.
It is. President Nelson asks a really thought-provoking question. Are we willing to let God prevail in our lives? To let his words, commandments, and covenants influence what we do each day?
Whoa, that's a big one.
It is. It makes you really examine your priorities. Are those teachings just a Sunday thing, or are they woven into everything we do?
It's about aligning our actions with our beliefs, making our faith more than just a bunch of words.
Exactly. And ultimately, President Oaks leaves us with this beautiful vision of what it means to truly follow Christ's example.
I love how he ties it all together. What does he say?
He says that just as Christ chose to forego contention, so should we.
We're called to choose a different path.
He calls us to adopt the language and methods of peacemakers in every aspect of our lives.
Not just in our public lives, but in our personal relationships too.
Everything. It all matters.
So it's not that we can't have strong opinions or advocate for what we believe in. It's how we do it.
Right. It's about respect and a genuine desire to understand, even when we disagree.
Choosing compassion over judgment. Seeking common ground.
You got it. And it's not always easy, but it's always worth it.
I love how he connects all of this back to the idea of becoming holier.
It's not about checking things off a list. It's about an internal transformation.
It's about becoming more like Christ.
Exactly. Letting those teachings permeate every part of our lives, shaping how we interact with the world.
Striving to be a little more like him each day, even in small ways.
That's beautifully said. It's a lifelong journey, for sure, but what a worthwhile one to embark on.
It's one thing to talk about it, right?
Uh-huh.
But actually putting it into practice, that's the real challenge.
It is. It's like that saying, between said and done, there's a whole world of undone.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So how do we bridge that gap then between knowing what to do and actually doing it?
Well, he gives us a starting point. He ends with this question. He asks, what small step can you take today to be a bit more like Christ in your interactions with others?
Today, I like that. It's not about some big grand gesture. It's about those small, everyday moments.
Exactly. Where we have the choice to react differently.
To choose a different path.
Maybe it's choosing kindness when someone's being difficult, or really trying to understand their perspective instead of just, jumping in to defend your own.
I'm so guilty of that.
We all are. It's human nature.
Right.
But even just really listening to someone without interrupting or planning your response in your head.
Just being present.
Being present.
No.
Being aware of the impact our words and actions have on others, even the small ones.
Because those small things do matter.
They really do. They ripple outward more than we realize.
It's like those little acts of love and compassion. They can change the whole world.
They can. And the more we make those choices consciously, the less it's about willpower, and the more it becomes just who we are.
It becomes part of us.
Part of our nature.
It's about that internal shift towards becoming more Christ-like, which, let's face it, is a lifelong journey for most of us.
It is a journey, but what a worthwhile one to embark on.
One that brings us closer to our values and helps to create a more peaceful and understanding world around us.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into President Oaks's message, that's the question we're leaving you with. What small step will you take today to bring a bit more peace, a bit more love into the world?
It's something to think about, to pray about, but most importantly, to do.
To do action is what matters. Let's all choose to be peacemakers, starting right now, in this very moment.
I love that peacemaker starting now.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.